was back in April 2005. They were arrested with about 8 kilos of heroin worth $4 million. Most got life sentences, though some appealed, but Andrew Chan and Myuran Sukumaran, who are the seen to be the two ringleaders, seem now to be inevitably close to the firing squad. They was taken out and shot. I think I think it is barbaric. Sukumaran applied for clemency, you'd be aware. That was denied. Chan has also applied and is waiting for a response. 5 or 6 people executed at the weekend. 2 countries have made diplomatic protests since. Australia is trying to save the lives of these 2 men. Hey, okay, they're drug smugglers. They're guilty. But they don't deserve to die like this. Ben Quilty is an Australian artist, one of the best Australian artists, in fact, best known. He spent some of the weekend with these men. He's on the line back in Australia now. Ben Quilty, good morning.
Good morning, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for your time. Do they still hold out any hope they can survive, these 2?
Yes, they do, mate. I mean, it's funny, the first time I met Myuran, I had the stereotype of the drug smuggler in my head, but that crime had happened 7 years before, and he'd lived with guilt for a long time. And in one conversation, I saw how rehabilitated he was, how healthy, how hopeful he was, and how hard he was working. And slowly but surely over the last 3 years, I've seen slowly life slip away and, the sentence approach, and finally that letter came. I don't think there's any other way you can survive in a prison like that with that in your future without having hope. And I actually entered the prison, and he's my friend. Mo has become my friend, dreading that day with him. But I strangely left the prison feeling better than I had come into it, because Myuran is an incredibly powerful, quiet, humble young man. And I don't know, it says a lot about the human condition that someone in that circumstance can still have hope.
Yeah. You saw him on Saturday?
I did, him and Andrew, yeah. And when I first saw him, obviously I couldn't hold it together, and neither could he. But then he stopped the conversation and, as he always does, said, "Come on, Ben, I don't have time to waste. Can we please go into my studio? Let's do some work. I have questions for you about the most basic technical things involving an art practice, and I want you to answer those questions for me, so let's go and do it." It wasn't until lunch that we properly sat down and then had a very in-depth conversation with Andrew and Maya about what is going to happen to them, what their research had led them to find out about what execution in Indonesia actually means. It's funny that they'd never ever looked that up. I think that was they feel like it's a last resort now. Now they need to know what's going to happen. That they'll either be sitting, standing, or kneeling, or lying down. They're given that option, and they're given the option of having a white sheet over their head. And both of them said to me, "Benny, we're not going to take this lying down," as all Australian young men would do, no matter what you've done in your past. And that's the thing, I did some bad things in my past. I was arrested, I put my mum and dad through some horrible things at the end of my school life, but I came good, and I can promise you that they are both rehabilitated.
But from what you say, and gee, how confronting to be researching the manner of your own death, they're intending not to be defined, but what, dignified?
Dignified and on their own terms, and still with a sense of humour. I mean, Myuran said to me, he was the one that said that there's the 3 options: lying down, sitting down, or standing up. And he said, with a fair amount of tears in his eyes, he said, "Benny, I'm going to learn how to do a handstand in the next month. They're not going to take me out that easily. And I don't know exactly what they're planning, but they are not going to take it lying down." And I just promised them I'd be back no matter what. They'll be given 72 hours if it does come to that, which I don't know what the timeline is, and neither do they. But I will go back in that 72 hours if I'm not back to teach a class and they're still going in 6 months.
Yeah. Do they feel the Australian government's doing enough? I think they probably are. I don't know as much as the Australian government can do, but do they feel they're supported?
Well, I was in there on the Saturday, and their hope at that point was based on the clemency demands being made by the Dutch government for the Dutch citizen who was then executed the night that I was leaving Bali and left Myuran and Andrew. So I'm sure they woke up on Sunday morning gutted by that news. But they have both told me that the Australian Foreign Minister is working very hard, and they're both quite moved, I think, by that. But obviously, as a friend, I hope that everything is being done, and I assume it is.
I've been living with this for so long. Are they frightened? Still frightened, or do you become numb to something?
I don't know that it's numb, but they're pretty resilient young fellows, and but yes, there's no doubt there's fear, and I know that Myuran's spending most of his quiet moments locked in his cell through the night in tears. I think it's more grief, to be quite honest, than fear. I think Myuran and Andrew both have lived with enormous guilt, and over the last 3 years I've seen, and that guilt has been dispelling because they are rehabilitated, and I think they feel that they've paid for what they've done, and as well, they are adult men now. They are grown adults with skills that they probably never dreamt they would have. If Myuran survives till the end of 2015, he'll complete his Bachelor of Fine Arts through Curtin Uni. So, I mean, that goes some way to show you, under the conditions that he is in, that he's managed by correspondence to pull that off is just remarkable.
Just achieves nothing, their death, to my mind. Achieves nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Myuran would be an incredible studio assistant. You know, he's smart. He works really, really hard. He's completely dedicated. And having one thing I always have felt that the Australian media has really demonised that prison. But if Myuran and Andrew are anything to go by, the Indonesians have done the most astounding job of rehabilitating those two young men. And then to do that and waste their lives with bullets through the chest just is... I can't get my head around it.
It must be almost like visiting a terminally ill friend with the ability, and the ability is there to save him, but it's not being used. I mean,
a terminally ill friend who's extremely fit and extremely healthy, clear eyes, no drugs. That's what I say. I can't get my head around it. I really can't. I felt a bit desperate as I left the prison. I said, Maya, why don't you escape? And he said, Benny, I could never escape. Can you imagine what would happen to the rest of my Australian friends in prison if I ran away from here? He's a very decent man who made a very bad mistake, and it's a very moving thing to be a part of.
Thank you for speaking to us. Ben Quilty, Australian artist and friend of Myuran Sukumaran, one of those Australians about to face firing squad. The other, Andrew Chan. As I said, I've been speaking to people very close to the case who believe there is very, very little hope now. I think that's wrong. I mean, what they did was massively wrong, of course. I think the federal police mishandled it. But I don't believe you achieve anything by putting them to death. I think it's barbaric.